Greetings, classicists. Welcome to Book 5 of the Odyssey. Let's get started. So, just a quick few to get you warmed up. And I'm sure you're loving these. I can tell by your faces in class that you do. What word becomes shorter when you add 2 letters to it? It's a mystery, but the answer is, of course, the word short. How many species of each animal did Moses take onto the ark? Classic misdirection. None, because it's Noah and the ark, if you believe such things. Finally, a cowboy rode into town on Friday, stayed one night, and left on Friday. How is this possible? It's about time zones, time travel. No, his horse was called Friday. There we go. A great intellectual warm-up for all of you. I'm sure you got those long before I got anywhere near them. So, first thing is first, we are going to look, before we dive into Book 5, at the nature of women in the Homeric world. And it's a little bit complicated. It's not as though there is one single view on women. There's some general principles and philosophies that are appropriate for women and that are good to know so that we can make our judgment. But as with any society or group of societies, which is a better way of describing the Greeks, there is variation in portrayal of women. But I think we can kind of narrow in on one ideal at any rate for Homer. And if you look at the pictures in front of you, you'll see 2 quite different types of ideal women. These are a little bit more appropriate to classical Greece. So the one on the left is that your left or my left? Anyway, the girl sort of doing the splits, holding up her dress, is actually a Spartan girl conducting exercise and activity to make herself strong for the good of the state. She is, however, showing a lot of flesh, and Spartan girls were considered to be quite sexual creatures by the rest of Greece. And on the right, you see a more traditional kind of Athenian woman who is heavily covered and close to being veiled, so very little exposed flesh and no sense of her shape or femininity, at least in public. And that's probably more the image that we have of the perfect woman in the Odyssey, although it's not entirely crystal clear. So you've now got a list of true or falses attached to this lesson, PowerPoint, whatever it'll be. It'll be attached to the assignment. So have a look at the true or falses. They're a bit of a laugh. Some refer to the Roman world. They do stretch across the classical era, but I think they do give you a good, if somewhat silly, sense in parts of how women were viewed. So which of them are true, which of them false? False? False. Go through the list and see. This is a glass of water, not gin and tonic, unfortunately. So pretty much all of them are true apart from one, which is mostly true, and that is the one about women being allowed to leave the house. They're not encouraged to leave the house, and they rarely do. In fact, in the Odyssey, Penelope never leaves the house. They are allowed out, though, for religious festivals and funerals. So there was some scope for them to leave the house. And obviously, if you're a lower class woman, you would be going out and working in the fields or selling in markets or something. So again, we're probably looking at ideals for upper class women rather than all women necessarily. Now, if you look on the back, or rather sort of scroll down on that sheet, there is something a little bit more relevant to Homer, and it's really asking you to rate the importance of various facets of high status and low status women, and out of 10. And it's a sort of there's a lot of argument to be had there, but I think I would say that the most important thing that either women of either status can do is produce legitimate male heirs. That is the most important thing. Probably the least important thing for Well, it's a tricky one. It then becomes a question of debate and discussion, and in a sense, it's up to you to make up your own mind on these, having read the Odyssey. But I think I would just say this to you: the most important thing is for women to produce a legitimate male heir, and in order to do that, she needs to remain chaste, to remain loyal, and to remain focused on her husband. So perhaps all sorts of other things flow on from there. With regards to a Homeric hero and their relationship with a lower status woman, there's no legitimate children coming from that, so it would be obedience and loyalty, and women do violate that. Lower status women do violate that, as you saw in Book 2 when Penelope was betrayed by one of her slave girls. Anyway, that's just some of those areas for you to start thinking about, and maybe we'll come back to it when we've read the Odyssey, and you can see if you agree with my assessment, and maybe you'll have changed your ideas of a ranking of importance. Is it the same for Penelope, Helen, and Clytemnestra? Arguably not. Okay, so a beautiful picture of the wave, and that is because obviously at the end of the book, Odysseus meets a great wave and survives. But let's. So some important questions for the next. Well, let's see, up until book 12. So the next 7 books, one might argue, and possibly beyond, in a sense. How does Odysseus show himself to be a true Homeric hero? But because that changes in terms of disguise and actions, identity, bravery, etc. But also, what part do female characters play in Odysseus's nostos? Could he succeed on his journey home without the help and support of women, be they divine or mortal or Siamese? No, okay, she's not interested. Right, so what I'd like to do now is stop the video, and there is also attached a book 5 test, so I would like you to do that without looking at your notes, and in 3 minutes have a go under timed conditions. We've really got to get this working under pressure going again. So pause this, have a look at the test, do it in 3 minutes, and keep track of your score. You should be getting at least 14 out of 20. That's the kind of bare minimum. That's what you'd be looking at to get a sort of C/D at A level, and higher would be, if you're hoping for a B or an A, which you all really should be, you want to be getting 16 plus, because these are straightforward sort of factual questions, if you like. Okay, now this. Oops, sorry, she's had enough. Oh no. Okay. We done? Are we ready? Yeah. So this is just a bit of a laugh. By all means, skip this bit. But this is an extract from possibly the worst film ever made, which is a 1998 version of the Odyssey. And if you go from the timestamp 1717 to 2116, you will see Hermes visiting Calypso and write down as many errors as you can, so ways in which they've deviated from Homer's story. You'll get quite a few, and it's pretty absurd and ridiculous. So it's a bit of a laugh. If you are pushed for time or do not find that sort of thing funny, then by all means move on. So let's dive into book 5 in terms of details. So we get a little bit of discussion between Zeus and Athene at the beginning, and Hermes flies off to go and give Calypso explicit instructions, and he flies over the seas. There's that real sense of distance, that sense of isolation, because after all, Calypso is the concealer, the hider, so no one really knows where her island is apart from the gods, and Odysseus certainly doesn't know where he is. And that doesn't mean the island is necessarily a bad place to be. There are some advantages to it, and we get a sense of that in lines 59 to 73 with the description of the island. And it's got a number of things that would have been, in some senses, appealing to a Bronze Age Homeric hero, and in other ways maybe a little bit threatening or a bit of a challenge. So if you look at the description, you'll see it's got potential. It's got many of the things that are needed for civilization, but they are not yet there. So for a group of people who travel the seas, colonizing and founding cities, as the Greeks do all over the Mediterranean, this is in a sense a prime spot. It's got everything you need if you can grab it and develop it. It's got trees for buildings and furniture and boats. It's got meadows for horses and other cattle, and maybe replacing it with plants. It's got wild celery, which you never know when you might need some wild celery. It's got crystal clear, beautiful water streams, which we take for granted. Glass of water here, delicious. But in the ancient world, you might not have access to water. You might not have access to clean water, and crops die, people die. So to have these clear, beautiful streams is a wonderful thing. What else is on that list? Yes, the grapes. So grapes can be made into wine, and wine is one of these core fundamental aspects of civilization, turning grape into wine. A great skill to do it well, but it's a sign of someone who is civilized. Although that needs to be developed a little bit, because if you drink unmixed wine, that is a sign of a true barbarian, someone who's not showing restraint. So you need to mix your wine in these great big bowls with water and then drink appropriately. The Greeks still got drunk, but you didn't drink unmixed wine. I guess it'd be people still get drunk in our society, although not you, because you're all underage. But be the difference between, say, having a sort of glass of gin and tonic with ice and lemon, and just drinking a pint of warm gin. Someone might get drunk, but one way is more civilized than the other, one might argue. Anyway, so Calypso's Island, this description of a place that is that has got a lot of potential, and it's quite tempting perhaps for a Bronze Age hero, but there are deep flaws with it. No one knows where it is. It's not part of the world. It's not part of the political world. It's not really part of the heroic world. So whilst it could be appealing, no one knows who you are. No one knows where you are. Do you even exist if no one is speaking about you from a heroic perspective? Arguably not. So we then move on to our first actual kind of real interaction with Odysseus, if you like. We've heard stories of Odysseus. We've seen what happens when Odysseus isn't there. But this is when we see Odysseus in the flesh, if you like. And rather strangely, he is sitting naked on the beach crying. And the reason for that becomes clear. There's perhaps multiple reasons for that. Odysseus is arguably crying because he misses Penelope. He misses his family and he wants to go home. And it's important to remember the chronology. This is the 9th year of his wanderings, almost the 10th. So Odysseus has been away from his family for almost 20 years. So one could very much argue that he is simply missing his family. But I think it's very much more than that. Odysseus is missing his kleos, he's missing his status, he's missing his place in the world. In this island, where it is just him and Calypso and a few maids, he has none of the things that make him Odysseus. He has no Time, he has no kleos, he has no family. So, given that, how can he really be a hero? So, we then get an interesting scene, which is the visit of Hermes. And Hermes comes down and has a chat with Calypso. Now, Calypso perhaps shows her slight lack of civilization and loneliness in the way that she greets Hermes. Because in theory, Hermes should be invited in and sat down and fed and given wine before even asking any kind of meaningful question. But Calypso straight away, maybe out of fear because she suspects what's coming, says, why are you here? What do you want? So a slight sort of breach in Xenia, if you like, but not a big one. Calypso then invites him in, gives him, a seat, and nectar and ambrosia, which is the wine and the drink of the gods. So I think she's showing a pretty reasonable amount of civilization to a divine individual. So I don't think we can describe her as barbaric and someone unaware of correct social customs, unlike Loki. Um, so, however, her reaction to Hermes' speech is probably a little bit more barbaric and beyond the pale. If you have a look at her speech to Hermes, she says some things that we might consider to be quite normal and quite reasonable. She says, why is it that male gods can have mortal lovers and get away with it and everyone's happy with it? But if female gods have mortal lovers, then chaos, panic, disorder, and pain ensues. How can this possibly be fair? Now, to us, that seems like quite a reasonable point. But I think from the Greek perspective, it's actually showing how full of passion and lust and how beyond civilization Calypso is. Because from this Greek male perspective, of course women can't sleep with who they want, be they divine or be they mortal. Women need to preserve their chastity, their lineage, but also they must not be in control of their sexual relationship. In a sense, it's a man's duty to control a woman's passion. So to us, that might seem like quite a reasonable thing for Calypso to say, but I think for the audience, it would have been, oh, Calypso, actually, she is a bit crazy. She's a bit strange. Maybe we thought she was okay with her Xenia and her weaving and her nice island, but wow, yeah, she's different. She's wrong. So, an important little characterization of Calypso there. Now, one of the other things that Calypso points out is the offer that she makes Odysseus, if you like. She says to Odysseus, why, or rather, if you stay with me, I will make you immortal, and you can stay on my paradise island, making love to me forever, never grow old. And it sounds like, arguably sounds like quite a good option for some, and I think it's supposed to. You can imagine those hard-working Bronze Age farmers and warriors, aching bones, sore limbs, sitting around the fire, listening to this story and thinking, gosh, what would I do in that situation? Would I actually be that keen to come home if I had that available to me? Anyway, think about what you would do and put your answers up in the group chat. No, don't. No one cares. Anyway, why does Odysseus choose mortal Penelope over immortal Calypso? I think there's a lot to be said for Penelope herself, and we'll come on to that when we see her. But fundamentally, she is his intellectual equal. His soulmate is a very cringy thing to say, but for want of a better word, I think it may be a relevant one. I think there's also another angle to it in that when mortals are made immortal, it doesn't actually go well for them. It rarely works out. It normally causes them extreme suffering, but forever. So I think Odysseus is aware that whilst it might be a nice idea, actually the gods always find a way of spoiling immortality for mortals. So he's probably a little bit conscious of that. And I think the third point that we talked about before is, again, it's all about heroic identity. If you're alive but you have no kleos, no time, no family, then to a degree, what's the point? Life is for obtaining, wealth, glory, slave girls, etc. More land. And if you're not doing those things, is there a point in being alive? Arguably, from a heroic perspective, not. But I mean, very, very debatable, especially within the confines of the Odyssey. But certainly something to think about. Now, we then get on to a classic kind of exam question, or be it a small little 10-mark question or a bigger essay question that would ask you to explore speeches throughout the whole book. And that is shown, if you like, in this. Well, it's not shown. I mean, this is an example of. So Odysseus gives a speech to Calypso, and I want you to stop and see if you can come up with 3 or 4 ways in which this speech to Calypso shows his skill with words. I have to read through. I mean, ideally, I'd like you to write a paragraph, but I'll just assume you've done it in your notes. Good. Okay, so there's all sorts of things that he does, but I think maybe one of the first things that we notice is a bit of mirroring. So Calypso finishes her speech in the bit before with the sort of question or the jealousy of Penelope. Why does Odysseus want to go back to Penelope? I am more beautiful than Penelope. And Odysseus's response straight away is a mirror. Yes, you are more beautiful than Penelope. And this is a kind of classic persuasive technique, taught in various dodgy business schools and YouTube videos. So straight away, he's doing that mirroring thing, showing that he understands Calypso's primary concern. He also, by just focusing on Penelope's negatives and no positives, he's trying to diffuse this tense situation here, because Calypso is clearly jealous, and if a goddess is jealous, then they will punish both Odysseus and Penelope. It wouldn't be uncommon for a goddess, if she's jealous of a wife, to make her ugly or dead or disappear or turn her into a strange animal. And Odysseus is terrified of this. So by minimizing Penelope's beauty and saying she is in no way comparable to Calypso, he's trying to reduce that level of jealousy. He then quite cleverly says, in essence, what I really miss is my home. And that's important, because that's something that Calypso cannot give him. She cannot give him his home. She can give him love, she can give him sex, she might be able to give him a family, in theory, although divine goddesses and pregnancy is always a little bit unusual in how it happens. Do goddesses actually choose whether to give birth or not? Anyway, it's a bit of a digression there. But what she cannot give him is his home. So his home on the island of Ithaca, his palace, his son, his household. And that's quite clever. That's quite a clever thing to say, because there isn't anything Calypso can do about it. So if there's just nothing you can do about it, then it's easier to let go. At the end of his little speech to Calypso, he just talks about his suffering, the constant suffering he's endured and will endure, and that is a simple plea for sympathy. How even if she started off angry with Odysseus, he said, "Oh yes, you're amazing, you're wonderful. The only thing I want is something you just can't give me, and I've been really badly hurt already. Is there any point in hurting me anymore?" So quite a smart and sneaky persuasive speech from Odysseus, and he does that throughout the Odyssey. Sorry, I had a battery meltdown there. So what gets him off the island? Is it himself? Is it Calypso? As always, it's a mixture of both, but you need to have an opinion as to what is the most significant. So Calypso gives him tools, metal tools, which are absolutely crucial, because with his bare hands, there's not really much he could do. She guides him to the best trees to make a raft, which is again extremely significant, although one would assume Odysseus could have done that himself, being a noted sailor and hero. He then builds the raft using techne and a great deal of skill and understanding of seamanship and boat building. And that's quite interesting, because the ability to build boats is quite a masculine thing. It's a masculine skill, and Calypso probably doesn't understand how to do that, because she is this chaotic female figure, whereas building a boat, in a sense, is the ultimate in masculine order, something that controls the wild sea and the wild cats. So once he has built the boat, she then gives him food and drink and a breeze in the right direction, but also navigational guidance, because remember, he's on this strange island beyond the bounds of normality, and he would have no way of knowing where he needed to go next without Calypso's assistance. So a combination of things gets him off the island. It is his skill, and it's Calypso's assistance. And what is more significant? Up to you. You can argue it either way, and well, up to you. Very much up to you. So Odysseus gets off the island. He's on his boat and he's sailing towards the land of the Phaeacians, a very interesting, although he doesn't really know it, a very, very interesting group of individuals. Suddenly, Poseidon notices and sends a great storm that wipes Odysseus off his raft, and we then get a very interesting and exciting passage that we can analyze. So if you look in the book, you will see a section of the book. Sorry, I really should have put page numbers in. I did mean to. You will see a section of the book where it clearly says, literary analysis question, storm, and I would like you to have a go at doing that one. So give yourself 12 minutes. Try and pick out 7 or 8 points. There's a couple of ideas for literary techniques, literary things that you could use given to you there. By all means use them, by all means don't. Keep it timed to 12 minutes or under, and submit it as part of this assignment. Off you go. Very good. Well done. So there we go. That was the passage. I don't think there's any sense in going through it. It's something I'll produce an exemplar or something that I'll give you in class. Now, there's a couple of interesting things that happen after this. We get a very strange little divine intervention. The goddess Ino, who doesn't really ever appear in the Odyssey again, magically appears and gives Odysseus a girdle that stops him drowning. And Athene intervenes and calms the waves once Poseidon's gone, and once Odysseus is thrashing around near the shores of Phaeacia, the river god draws him in. So these divine interventions are crucial, because whilst he swims and saves himself, and he drags himself up onto the mast of his raft, and it's all very he wouldn't be able to do it without his own heroic strength. There is this huge sense of divine intervention, and that's arguably because the gods are agents of fate and they drive fate forwards. Odysseus was close to death when he shouldn't have been, and so the gods intervene to set things back on their rightful course. Give these questions some thought before you finish the lesson. How does Odysseus show himself to be a true Homeric hero in Book 5? And what part do female characters play in Odysseus's Nostos so far? Now, an important thing to note there, female characters. Sometimes the exam board can get a little bit sneaky and say mortal female characters or immortal female characters. But if you think about it in Book 5, just as female characters, what have they all done? How has Athene driven him forward in his Nostos and his journey home? What's Calypso done? What's Ino done? Arguably quite a lot. Anyway, that is a quick, from my perspective, run through Book 5. So I will set you homework for next week, and I will see you in the classroom when I see you. Take care.